morning, everyone. Can we hear me? All right, cool. Last time I was in front of a crowd this big was about 15 years ago in college in a wrestling match with a piece of spandex on me, so I'm a little bit nervous to be in front of you guys again today, but thanks for coming out, and looking forward to show you guys some cool stuff here. So, especially being at 10:30 in the morning, I'm sure some of you guys have the BlizzCon Saturday morning hangover. So I'll try not to scream too loud in your ears here. All right. So, as Mark was showing you, based off all the amazing concepts, the stage with modeling that we had to start doing was to actually take those concepts and do a literal translation of them. So I'm going to go over that a little bit, and then I'm also going to talk to you about a lot of the different lands that Deathwing was going to destroy. So that's my specialty with the environment modeling, but I am going to be representing our entire modeling team today to get into both things. So the first thing to think about with Deathwing is this is the biggest character we've ever done before in terms of small details, large details. We knew he was going to be flying over everyone, all the different cities. He was going to have to look really good from a distance. He was also going to have to look good up close. So we had a lot of different modelers working on this, and so many different people touched this asset. And there was two guys in particular that really spearheaded this. Two of our talented character modelers, Chung and Alvaro. Chung, he was a really good selection for this because he actually single-handedly pretty much handled all of Sindragosa for the Wrath of the Lich King cinematic. So he's a dragon expert. He's really good for this. And just talking about how monumental the scale was of Deathwing, he was huge. By huge, we mean really huge. So this representation here will show you how Deathwing just dwarfs Chung and Alvaro, and he is bigger than the size of a football field. So this was, you know, a really big thing to work on. So in order for us to get to this phase where you see this final really nice textures and model detail, we start with a concepting phase of our own in a 3D modeling process. And this is where we'll have artists work out base shapes, we get art direction, we apply more feedback from these base shapes, get some more art direction, and then we can kind of get a final sculpt like you see here. So one thing to think about with this, the cool part of this studying process that you see here is this 3D sculpting programs are used. Some of you might actually do them yourselves, like ZBrush, Mudbox, but it's this really free-form, fun way for us to create as artists with a very limited technical restrictions. So just imagine if you had a box of clay yourself and you can start making forms and have a lot of fun with it, and then we worry about the technical stuff after. So this is the best way for us to get these base forms signed off. The next thing we have to do is start adding all the extra little details. And as Mark was telling you, you know, Deep Home was a big challenge for us. So this shows you an example of where we do things to the camera. We want to really focus on what the viewer is going to see. So you can see in here, if you were to see actually firsthand, we have this low poly geometry. Then we have an art director come in and they'll paint over this again. And then you can kind of get the final look that you have here if everything goes according to plan. One other thing in particular to think about is an asset like Deathwing is so big that we wish we had time to make every single little part of him look amazing. But due to production needs and also making sure that we give the biggest bang for the buck for the viewer, we have to focus on these isolated areas. So that's why you're not going to see a close-up of Deathwing's ankle, because we just don't need to spend a lot of time on it. And then, you know, in the end, you'll get this really nice look like you saw here. So before I get into the environments, what I want to just talk about is how creating Deathwing was a unique situation where we had a lot of creative freedom, meaning I don't think we'd really fleshed out and complete 100% before the capacity what Deathwing was going to look like in its entirety. So we got to work a lot with the dev team, as you saw, with the jaw getting bigger and bigger. And it was this really fun organic creation process. Now when we're moving into the World of Warcraft, the lands, we know all of you players out here recognize the different structures that are in the game. So it was very critical that we made sure that everything that we create in our cinematic world represents the stuff that you guys see as players every day when you're in the game itself. So a good example of this to start with is Darkshore. And what I want to focus on here is where we take things with heightened realism, and we'll go from an in-game asset. Heightened realism example would be like small planks on the pier here. In this next shot, if you look down low, there's algae barnacles on the bottom of pier structures. We even add shingles to the tops of roofs. You may ask, why do we go shingles instead of these straight boards? this is an interesting part of the creative process where we get to work with our extremely talented in-game team and talk to them about, hey, we got this idea, we want to add some more detail, we think it's going to help sell the scale. And even in something like this where maybe it strays a little bit from the in-game design, they're like, yeah, go for it, let's make it happen, and we get those little extra elements in there that really sell this and make it feel believable in this cinematic world that we take our movies to. So a good example of where this creative process is a little bit different is, and I wanted to focus on the Sky Tower that we did for Ogremar, is our concept team and our team itself. Anytime we get to work on these in-game assets, we love to just go crazy, add tons of detail, and sometimes we start to get a little bit away from what the gamers recognize. And what we did in this case is we started going really rounded with the Sky Tower, and although it was looking pretty cool to us and we actually got somewhat far in the production process, something just didn't feel right to us. So we took a step back in this case after working with in-game, and we actually went to the game, took some screenshots from what our camera was going to see, and we noticed, hey, this feels a lot better, it's angular, and even though some of us that are these crazy high poly guys are thinking, oh, this is supposed to be low poly, and maybe it's supposed to be polygonal. The orcs actually, their architecture and culture is supposed to be harsh angular stuff. So we were able to kind of dial this back, come into this realm, and once we did it, it just sang with us, and it felt much more recognizable to the game. So the next thing I want to focus on is where we not only add heightened realism to our structures from the end game to the final, but also how we work on monumental structure. So this example is using is Lakhmadan, and in here you'll see from the end game to the basic model we start to add small structures, supports, cracks. Once we get into texturing, you can see tons of layers of little bricks, mortar. We have really nice water stains. When this comes through again, you probably won't be able to see it because our effects team covered up all the work. But there's some really cool plants that actually hang up from the... sorry, yeah, it's all good.
Sorry.
No, that actually hang down from the structures of the faces, these kind of things. And also, I just want to thank our in-game team and some of our editing team for getting us these nice kind of camera comparisons of the in-game to the cinematic render. It's pretty fun to check it out. So the final thing that I want to focus on before I hand it off to Mike is how we introduce monumental scale and heightened realism through the use of animation. Since we don't have animation represented here today, the one thing to look at here is where Deathwing lands upon Stormwind. So we saw real-world scale and size through the weight and heaviness of Deathwing. He's landing on these towers. He's crumbling with his force. Structures are breaking off. You can see, if you saw the really close animation, it's like, it's pretty cool. And also, too, the one thing that people always think about with animation is, it's always just a character. If you notice the camera shake, we actually have a previs team or our directors will come in and they're like, hey, we want this stuff, the cameras to react to our creatures or to our environments or to an explosion. All these little touches give you that really final cinematic look that kind of sells and gets you invested in the cinematic. So other than that, the one thing, of course, to focus on is how the effects help sell the real-world scale and the detail of everything. And I'll turn you guys over to Mike Kelleher now.